Gentlemen, I've appreciated the candor with which you've responded. I'm thinking along with regards to the current proposals for funding. I don't think there's anybody on this committee that doesn't want to see the appropriate funding levels offered and maintained. Part of the discussion that we've had, as you're well aware, is the use of OCO funding. And part of your concern is the fact that it does not provide you anything in a base. But would it not be appropriate with appropriate direction with the OCO funds that you would be able to perhaps reconsider the way that you would view the use of those funds? But you're asking for a specific direction within the legislation. Fair statement?
I don't know that I would say we're asking. I think we are saying, I would say this, and I'll turn it over to...
Perhaps suggesting?
Yeah. Well, so for one example might be, and I'll turn it over to General Holmes here in a second, but for example, what's the criteria you could use OCO for? If it's for procurement, is it, I mean, the traditional thing in the last few years is if you lose an aircraft, like in, you know, an F-16 crashes or something, that tends to be something that OCO rules would apply for a loss replacement. Well, are the rules willing to be widened and changed from that, for example?
Precisely, but
Yeah.
what you're saying is under the existing OCO rules, as you have had them presented to you in the past, it presents a problem.
He's the expert.
Yes, sir, it does. I mean, there's been some creative use of funds. We funded some Army End Strength for several years to control their drawdown through OCO. So, you know, there are ways to use it and to use it effectively. Our concern is more the one-year nature of OCO and not being able to plan ahead into the future. Thank you.
Understand. Thank you. Now, let me turn very quickly to the long-range strike bomber. Dr. LaPlante, the Air Force leaders have consistently stated that the aircraft per unit cost of the LRSB would be at or below $550 million. Yet at the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Sea Power and Projection Forces hearing on March 4th, you seem to intimate the cost today when accounting for inflation would be somewhat higher. Extrapolating annual inflation out to 2025 would indicate that the 10-year cost would be well over $640 million per aircraft. Do you believe sticking by the 550 unit cost without always qualifying it with the 2010 base year dollars is somewhat misleading to the American public? Where do we go?
Yeah, I'm really glad I got the question. I just wish I had a chance to be in my classroom because I love this. This is great. With 3 minutes on the clock, I'm going to have to figure this out. So nothing has changed in LRSB. We have completely designed the program around affordability. Nothing has changed. It is doing everything exactly the way all of us who've researched it, who have looked at what's gone wrong in acquisition, we're addressing everyone. Requirements completely unchanged. We actually baked in as a KPP the cost per airplane. 100 airplanes, the cost is $550. Ironically, because we're so paranoid about changing the requirement, the document was signed in 2010. We're like, oh, can we adjust it for inflation? So we should remind everybody, we know, and the budgeteers know, that inflation happens, just like you know with your constituents and people with their salaries. We know that that happens. You can do an internet calculator and see that $55 in 2010 is $57 today. We know that it's all taken into account. Do I think we probably need to change it so people are confused? Sure. I'm sure it's not going to stop the questions. We did the same thing at F-35. About 2 years ago, I guess in 13, we were still quoting 12 numbers. And we found then that some people were using then-year dollars. And finally we said, stop, here are the rules. The F-35 is always going to be talked about in price per plane and then-year dollars with the engine. So now everybody's saying the same thing. Lockheed says the same thing. We're saying, so we'll probably, it's now 2015, so yeah, we probably should do it. But there shouldn't be a lot of intellectual energy I spent on that other than we just need to be clear. But let me make one other point, and again, I really am sensitive to your time. This is really important, okay? There's 3 pots of money and ways you fund phases of an acquisition program. The first is when you develop the program. It's typically R&D, and that's what you do. We don't have the privilege of letting industry develop on their own nickel most of the time. We have to develop it ourselves. So that's called development, okay? Then you switch, hopefully pretty reasonably, into production. That's when you produce the airplanes, and then you sustain them. And as I said earlier, most of the money, when you look in the life cycle of a program, is in that sustainment phase. And in fact, that's the biggest risk, by the way, to F-35, again, the cost is sustainment. So let's talk about what is the right contracting strategy in each one. Okay, and we've been trying to really show people, and Frank Kendall has been doing this very well, of getting people to think and understand the literature. There's not a checklist. You don't use a checklist. You actually have to think. Turns out in the data, 70% of development programs, and this actually intuitive to me makes perfect sense, are cost type programs, they're reimbursable costs. And that's typical in research and development, because what happens is it's just fine that you have a goal of what you want to get done in the development, but you oftentimes don't have enough precision in exactly how much it's going to cost, so you just do cost reimbursable. Now, if you just left it alone at cost reimbursable and did nothing, that might be a problem. You say, oh, gee, you know, but then what you do is you put incentives in, and this is what we're teaching people. An example of an incentive. You would put in and say, okay, the target, and you're going to spend in that development is this much. This is your target. It's cost reimbursable. You go above that target, we're going to start whacking your profit. You go even this higher, you're going to get zero profit. So that's what we're teaching people. Now still, sometimes you want to do fixed price and development. We're doing the tanker fixed price and development for certain reasons. We're doing the CRH fixed price. Like I said,
Let me just,
I know.
I'm out of time, but let me just ask this. What you're saying is that we're on target.
Yeah.
You're on top of it.
Yeah.
And this very, very valuable long-range piece of machinery that we're looking at is moving ahead without any surprises so far.
No, and if I could just, this is really important. If I could, Mr. Chairman, give 20 seconds. Okay, here's the LRSB, procurement, fixed price. By the way, 100 airplanes, even the first one that comes off the line is going to be fixed price. That is unprecedented in this kind of a program. So you better believe we have this thing controlled. And so I don't know if people are confused or they're bringing up inflation, but it's actually pretty straightforward and nothing has changed.
Thank you, sir.